Hello, good morning, afternoon, or whatever may happen to be in your neck of the woods, and welcome to the build guide. So, this question has come up a whole bunch. How do you actually make a build in this game? In many cases, it's actually misunderstood as like the weapon plus the class is the build, essentially. Not the case. There's actually a hell of a lot of stuff that you can potentially consider, and it's actually one of the things that makes challenge running this game so much fun. Now, these mechanics, bear in mind that they are the same as the vanilla game in One Vision. Essentially, it's mostly like stats and items and stuff like that, and skill availability that's moving around, so technically speaking, a lot of the stuff from this guide will also apply to vanilla, just kind of bear in mind. I mean, personally, I found going through vanilla was a lot more enjoyable after understanding how the mechanics work through One Vision. So, either way, without any further ado, let's get into it. The first thing to bear in mind for everything is to understand what the stats actually do. So for those that didn't know, you have two sets of stats on each character. To the left here, this is your base stats. This is your actual character. To the right is going to be your derived stats. This is essentially going to be the ones that they're getting after their equipment, after their class, all of that stuff is added together. Then this stuff up here is, I mean, it kind of does the job most of the time. It's just kind of assuming a general attack, defense, accuracy, whatever value for everything. Not accuracy, I don't know why I said that, but either way. Defense, attack, magic, all that kind of thing. So, what do these stats do? So there's three that are kind of basic function, like single-use skills. The rest are all pulling double duty in some form or another. So first things first, it should be noted that when it comes to strength and dexterity here, both of them are going to be boosting your weapon damage. Typically, it's going to be about 60% to 40% split between them. Bear in mind, you're never going to be like this one thing boosts everything all the time forever. You generally speaking want to have both if you have the option. So if, like for example, if you have a heavy two-hander, strength will be your ideal one. Dex will do just fine if you have some other benefit from it. So strength, it's just your overall physical power. Essentially, obviously it's going to help with heavier weapons. It will help with lighter ones too. It'll also boost your physical defense. So bear in mind when you see stuff like, for example, I know I had, that wasn't on this guy. Like, let's say we take a look at this stuff down here. These powered armors, as they were called. There, where is it? It's somewhere over here. I swear I've played this before. So, like, right here. You're technically seeing that, yeah, it's going to be lower defense, health bonuses, all that kind of thing. That strength bonus, though, you can see its actual, like, defense, it ends up going a decent bit higher there. It's like, for example, the real trade between these two. This one's, essentially this one's a medium armor. But comparing it with, like, Damask here. So the Damask will be about 1 extra overall defense. This one's going to be a little bit worse versus casters, but you're getting a lot more offensive stats off this one, on top of a lot of weight. So, either way, it depends on which one you want to go for. I mean, like, personally, this would be the one that's boosting Vitality. We'll get to that one later. Just point being, that one would still serve a similar role for a more offensive class. So, going back to those stats now. Vitality is just going to be your straight defense stat. This will actually function in all situations. So, for example, say you're being hit by a caster, saying you're being hit by a physical guy, it will scale down your damage regardless of what's coming at you. It doesn't affect evasion. It doesn't affect any of that. It is just straight damage reduction. Next up, we have Dexterity. It'll help out more with the lighter weapons. It'll still work with the heavy weapons. It'll boost your accuracy and your evasion. If you're playing vanilla, this is going to be your go-to stat for just about everything. Essentially, in vanilla, Dex tended to have a lot of unusually high scaling. That's actually why it did so well. But yeah, it comes with a nice bit of added side effects there as well. Next up, we have Agility. This is the next one that's going to be just a straight one and done kind of skill. Just a straight accuracy boost for all your physical attacks across the board. This is one you tend to see a lot on swords in particular. They tend to be ones that either boost it in most cases or drop it in some cases. You also see it dropped on heavy longbows as well, or siege bows as the game first called them. Essentially, this is just your primary accuracy ability for everything physical. Next is your Avoidance. This avoids everything. Going into it originally, I thought that Avoidance just meant physical avoidance. No, it is a straight avoidance to all things. This caps out at 75% avoidance, so after a certain point, you start seeing those breakpoints happen. So if you ever wondered why you can never get it below a 25% hit chance for most things, that's why. Intelligence is going to be your damage and accuracy with all caster abilities. Pretty standard kind of stuff there. Mind is actually one of my favorite ones, because it tends to get overlooked a whole bunch. It's actually one of those things that was an unusual hidden benefit of clerics in the vanilla game. But yeah, boosts accuracy primarily, but it also boosts damage, also boosts evasion, also boosts defense. So this is one of those ones that's very handy to have on equipment pieces, just because of that evasion, defense, all of that kind of thing. It's just useful across the board, good for everybody, nice thing to have. And then resistance is the last one. It resists. What a shock. Now, it's just a resistant casting ability. It doesn't really resist status effects, just so you know. And then lastly is a hidden stat. So here's the thing. No one but God or Matsuno really knows how luck works in this game, so it's kind of unclear. Now, my personal theory, after testing multiple runs of just using luck builds, after messing around with this game constantly on both versions, my take on it is that luck is essentially like the jinxed ability from Fallout, where essentially if you boost it high enough, everything just goes completely haywire, to the point where regular attacks can't hit, parries land all the time, and then crits will just be constant. And then crits seem to avoid evasion and everything else. So I think, the way that I'm understanding crits is they can still be parried, because there's a little bit of a change in the animation when they're about to get a crit, but that still seems to be parryable. So ultimately, it seems like, yeah, if you go for a heavy crit build, also put a bunch of ranked skills behind it, because apparently that sucker will only be able to defend with parry, because evasion suddenly doesn't matter anymore. Again, weird stuff happens when you boost luck. It's a fun stat to mess around with. In some cases, yeah, you'll start noticing that your parries never land, all your stuff's completely missing all the time. That means you've got low luck going on. Now, this is one that can actually vary a lot, and this is actually something that's been a thing in all Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre games since forever. And in fact, I believe it actually still counts as a class-gained stat in this game, because I can't help but notice that when messing around with level 1 characters in the end game, they tend to get hit freakishly often. And I mean, like, hit with crits and all that freakishly often. But yeah, as far as luck goes, it'll vary by the day, it'll vary by your location, it'll vary on the cards you picked up, it'll vary on the character, how they're feeling that day, what they had for lunch. It just constantly goes up and down. In fact, if you ever want a good laugh, look up the luck system for Knight of Lotus, because that mess is like, somebody wrote a friggin' thesis trying to understand that mess. It's amazing how overcomplicated they get with luck in these games. But yeah, either way, in general, you know, even if you boost luck all the way up, you'll mostly just start seeing funny stuff, and that's actually what this guy's build is right here. So, for example, this is one of those super end game, like, unique weapons and all that kind of thing. And just decided to make a luck build based around that, and it wound up being very fun to have essentially a double attack, like four tile explodey spear crit build. And here's the thing. You'll notice I start off with the stats there. Everything will be based around those. That'll always give you a general idea of what each piece of equipment is going for. Now, why do I phrase it that way? Because each thing has a particular role, but I don't want to get into each exact item to explain what that is. There's a certain mentality behind each of these things. Like, for example, you see a vest, it's going to be evasion. It's going to give you some moderate defense. It'll give you health. Don't drive yourself crazy trying to get into the nitty-gritty of all the numbers, because there's a lot of numbers. But the general themes behind everything will tend to be what's important. So, like, let's say, for example, you're in the end game. You want to have a really long-range archer, right? So you can look at the side grades, and you see, like, okay, this thing has 6 to 10 range. It's a siege bow. It's got extra power behind it. But okay, what's all this stuff telling you? This thing is going to be relatively inaccurate. It's got a higher attack than its normal version. Okay. It's got better bonus damage, which, bear in mind, this bonus damage, like it says, it's a percentage of your final attack value. Again, don't go crazy trying to get into all the numbers of it. These percentage bonuses are essentially like, the stats are checked between the characters, then the attack defense values are checked, then all of your bonuses are applied. So think of this just as your scaling damage, more or less. And then lastly over here, we see that it's got weight. To give you an idea of where the weight ranges are, typically 2 to 4 is going to be basically like nothing. It's going to be like daggers, originally used to be side grade katas there. But yeah, like daggers are 2, for example. 10 is relatively significant. We'll get into why it's significant in a little moment here. And then lastly, we have our RT bonus over here, so this is going to be the amount that you're getting to your recovery time. This is something you can compare to this number on the top right, actually. So, essentially, the way speed works in this game, and the way that the reason that weight is significant, is because of recovery time. So, essentially, this is the countdown timer that starts ticking when your turn is essentially when you've already taken a turn. Right, so their default value is 93, that's where they're going to start the battle at. They essentially double that by firing this bow. Now, each class will have a particular speed assigned to them. So like right here, you'll see that they're agile, so they're not going to be taking too much of a penalty for each tile that they move. But for every tile that they move, they'll essentially be adding to that cost. So the weight of each particular thing is going to be what's affecting your base speed. So like for example, this thing's 2. You can see that base value suddenly went down to 85. So essentially, every time that you're messing around with one of these, it's something to bear in mind. That the heavier your equipment, the slower you'll move. Obviously it's a dull kind of moment, but still, just something to bear in mind in terms of trying to keep weight low. So, as far as recovery time and all that kind of thing, things that affect your speed. It's going to be the weight of your equipment is going to affect your base speed. That's going to be the base value you go to every turn. So that's going to be the one that's going to make the biggest difference throughout your build there. The next thing is your class's movement speed. So, for example, something like an archer, they're not meant to move very often. They're going to have a pretty high movement cost. Or actually, no, they've still got agile. What am I saying? They're going to be okay in terms of their movement, but if they move and fire, it's going to be very noticeable. Whereas something like a soldier there or a knight, they're all going to be. They've got a moderate movement value. Generally speaking, if you want somebody to move quickly, don't move them very far. Each time you move adds to your recovery cost there. Whereas you get some of them, if I can find a slow one here somewhere. Apparently I don't have very many slow characters in this. A slow character will essentially be taking additional penalties while moving. They'll be, as implied, slow. What a shocker. Now, each individual class will actually have additional variants on top of that, like for example, rogues and griffins here will be the fastest. They'll be the ones that take almost no penalties from, I believe it's, I think it's like 2 recovery time per tile that they move. So some of your really lightweight classes will be able to move around almost unrestricted, whereas your heavier ones, generally speaking, will have higher costs. Now, there is no exact value on this menu to my awareness. I don't believe that's something that can actually be added in. But generally speaking, if it says they're agile, you can expect them to be able to move a moderate distance before having issues. If you move your full distance, it should be noted that this game over vanilla actually just comes with all Swiftfoot skills already built into the class. So if you move their full distance, they will be slower. Just always bear that in mind. Shorter moves, quicker turns. Okay, so speed is going to be a big one. Your attack is always going to be a big one. So different weapon categories. I'm not going to go into exactly what each and every different weapon does exactly, but here's what you need to know. Attack value, generally speaking, is going to be your armor penetration value, is the way that I like to think. Because essentially, if that value beats the defensive value of the other unit, you get all of your scaling damage applied. If it doesn't meet it, it'll still try to scale up whatever's left over and just kind of see what works out. And if it's low enough, you end up doing just 1 damage. So essentially, everyone's stacking all of these defensive items of different kinds. And for example, like this one's got 106, the shield's giving 12, this one's giving 16, so we're already up to 26. This one would be, let's see, 56 up to 63, right? Something like that. So like, let's say 63 off that, plus 67 because of this ring, and then it would be scaled down with these vitality bonuses that they're getting. So, essentially this thing would start off with about, well, before their stats, like it would check their stats first, and then it would come up with a number. Then this thing would have roughly like 43 damage left over of its defense value there. Essentially, that gets scaled up based off those base stats and off of the bonuses that the weapon has. So, for example, if they're augmenting fire, they will get 5% per rank based off that. If they're attacking an Ogre unit, they'll get 20% off that. They'll just get a flat 4% bonus on top of it with this. So that's more or less how it works. I'll try to include the damage calculator But this is why I said you don't really necessarily want to get into the nitty-gritty of the numbers. Generally speaking, here's what you got. We're just going to go do a quick overview of everything. Fists. They poison something. Later on, they can punch into MP. They can also do a better poison. Knives. They will have a bind effect attached to them. They'll give you a bit of an agility bonus. So that's your accuracy. Oh, sorry. Bit of a hiccup there. They're very quick to use. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention about the fists. They give you an avoidance bonus, so a very good defensive item. I should probably mention before moving forward, your defensive or your stat bonuses, with exception to luck, only apply will only apply for your main hand item. So, for example, this one right here. If you're dual wielding something, your second weapon won't apply. Just something to bear in mind. Again, unless it's luck, because it's not one of the listed stats. Just go with it. Anyway, so these will have a bind effect on them. Essentially, they're there to hamstring somebody. They're a nice little just thing to have there. Personally, I do like using these as an offhand weapon, just because, yeah, if you have an archer or something like that using a short bow, they counter with a dagger. You know, a decent chance of that guy's getting bound all of a sudden, so they're stuck to the ground. It should be noted, archers also have a unique finisher with daggers. But anyway. Point being, they're mostly a defensive item. For casters, you've got one here that'll boost mind, give you spell strike. You know, pretty handy stuff there. Swords, in general, they're going to be your accurate weapon. They're moderate weight, high accuracy. They will further increase their accuracy when they hit stagger. It's got a pretty good chance to hit with that. Then your side grade variant down the line is going to be a two-handed version for characters that don't necessarily get access to heavy weapons, but would like something with a bit more punch. They get accuracy bonuses, they get avoidance bonuses. Pretty solid overall. Decent bit of extra scaling and all that kind of thing. Next, you've got two-handers. Essentially, these are going to be your beefy, highest scaling in the game melee damage. Gives a really hefty accuracy bonus, really hefty bonus damage. Comes with overpower, comes with stagger. Side grade variant will drastically reduce your accuracy. Essentially, instead of boosting it, it'll throw it in reverse, but it'll give you the highest potential damage in the game if you can figure out how to land it. Really handy with 100% hit moves and all that kind of thing. Further little note here, all 100% hit chance abilities will come with the ability to automatically hit whatever the secondary effect would be that you've got on your weapon. So if you've got like a claw, you've got poison on there, you got vigorous strike, well not vigorous, if you get like sure strike from any source, like let's say Fated Circle off Rune Fencers, smash with that, suddenly it's always going to hit poison. It's a one-time use thing obviously, but very handy to have. Next up we got axes. They're there to reduce defense. You've got your heavier axes that'll come with overpower as well. They've got a side grade that will slow down enemies a good chance of the time. So these are very, very, very strong on something like a Terror Knight. If they can get a slow and a Terrify off at the same time, they've just ruined somebody. Next up we got spears, and then those are going to be your, obviously, two-tile weapon. They're drastically stronger than they were in vanilla, that's for sure. They come with a moderate defense bonus. The heavy versions come with a parry bonus, and then you can upgrade them into pikes. Those are your 2 to 3 tile spears. So yes, unlike vanilla, you've got your your options over which range you'd prefer. They're different purposes for different stuff. It just kind of depends on what you prefer, what you're building towards. Hammers, essentially going to be a stun effect. Your later versions have an RT version, or RT delay version, as well as another one that functions as Vulgar. So, for example, these are essentially ones that are there as bonus anti-zombie damage and all that kind of thing. Situationally useful, but potentially really cool. So, kind of depends on what you want to go for there. Katanas of both kinds essentially are just going to be reducing TP when they hit. You get a luck bonus off both kinds. One-handed katanas have a second or a side grade version that'll reduce luck and improve attack. Essentially, this is for allowing better dual wielding, so you're not critting as often and knocking them away for that second hit. Whereas the two-handed version comes with a draw-out effect. This will essentially be just a one-time use finisher that's functionally like Sporagmos from the vanilla game, but it scales with your 2 HK skill. Next you got Cudgels. I mean, it's a stick, it's for casters. You got another version that's for fighting. Neat. You got Whips. Those are going to be giving you either a Tame or Subdue bonus. They're going to be giving False Strike. They're actually deceptively strong. Really low weight, reasonably quick attack speed and all that kind of thing. Really handy for frontliners, even though it may not necessarily look like it. Spell books are going to be 2 to 3 range. They'll all give you a massive boost against one particular race type, so if you feel like being super racist, here's your book to do it. Next, you got instruments. These are going to be a charm effect. Same thing, 2 to 3 range. I mean, it is what it is. And then, yeah, ranged weapon-wise, sidearms are going to be all your blowguns with all kinds of different status effects on them. There's a bunch of new ones if you never gave these a try since vanilla, so a bunch of cool stuff there. Then, yeah, you've got your thrown weapons. Those are going to come with either a bind or a slow effect, or, sorry, a hobble or slow effect. Essentially just going to be slowing down whoever they're hitting. They're, once again, deceptively strong. They've actually got a pretty decent amount of punch behind them, but they're very slow to use. And then we get into bows. I mean, bows are bows. The main outlier of those bows are going to be the siege bows, which are 6 to 10 range as opposed to the normal 3 to 8. With much better vertical forgiveness, much worse accuracy, decently better power, drastically lower speed, but then you're also unable to fire beyond bow range. So these are more for firing uphill and all that kind of thing. Next you got crossbows, same thing, 2-handed variants, 1-handed variants. You've got a 1-handed variant that's got the highest range in the game at 12. Essentially, these are a 1-handed version that can only fire in a straight line, so it's functionally a drill that's a crossbow. Next you got guns, pistols, rifles, all that kind of thing. Nothing too special here, they're very slow to use. The pistols are decent, the rifles are the equivalent of most of the heavy weapons in the game, but they've got the highest attack bonuses. Additionally, they've got some pretty unique finishers behind them, and yeah, pretty solid range. And then you've got the lobber, so that's always nice. Anyway, that's just kind of going over your general options in terms of, you know, your initial build ideas. Like I said, I don't want to go into absolutely every single category, because what it's going to come down to is originally those stats. So, like, let's say... what's a good example here? This is one that actually comes up a decent bit. So, like, how do you do the princess build here? The usual question is, like, what's the ideal? What's the meta? And there isn't one. That's the best way to put it. Like, for example, you could go for, like, a dagger build. You go for a spellcaster dagger or something like that. Like, let's say we wanted a caster version, right? Actually, since I already have it up, let's go over why I usually go with this version. Like, personally, I prefer that she be a tanky frontliner. So, like, for example, when I go over her skills and all that kind of thing, I like to be able to combine a bunch of different stuff. So, the way that I usually have her built out is we have Conviction. Essentially, that is a one-tile ability that'll do crushing damage as an action move during your turn, so that means you can do it on top of attacking. So you run up, do Conviction, throw out a spear hit, you know, pretty solid damage. In many cases, it's going to be enough to one-hit KO a lot of things. You put in Still Light before that, boost that damage even further, or if you know that they're not going to be able to hit somebody, or if you're not able to get into range of where you want to be, you've got this here to go boost somebody to give them a haste. At the same time, you can have them go attack somebody else, or do some casting, or something else. They're essentially very versatile in terms of how many ranges and how many things they can do. So I personally like to build them as a kind of multiple action type of situation. Also, I need to take another sip of coffee here, real quick. But yeah, I like to build them as a multi-action kind of thing. But let's say you wanted to go for more of a dagger caster kind of situation. So let's go ahead and get this one here. Actually, we probably want to go for, where is it? Bear in mind, some of these will show up as a little bit out of order. It's fine, don't worry about it. It's just this save file. So we want to go for like a tanky caster type situation. So I want them to have like decently high evasion. I want them to have decently high armor on top of that. So we'll go for the parrying dagger. We'll go for the regular dagger. We're going to spec them for light, so we'll go ahead and give them the robes here. I mean, obviously, you won't have access to a lot of stuff. That's why I'm not going out of my way to get some of these things. Give them a Holy Crown. Essentially going to give them the ability to absorb MP. And then just for the hell of it, actually, I believe we already have the Hallowed Choker on somebody else, but her necklace, yeah, honestly, you might as well never take this off her. It's a luck bonus, defense bonus, MP bonus, int mind, and resistance bonus. It's going to be some of the best stuff that you can get for her. Essentially, what you're getting here is something that'll cause her to act unusually well for reasons they may not understand, and also the necklace is always going to be assigned to her exclusively. Which again, sounds like a weird way to put it, but that's kind of the way it goes. So, We know that we're going to get a Spell Strike build out of it. We know we've got Divine here, Oglight, you know. You could probably pretty much just stick with the same setup here. They've got Clarity for MP Restoration, but they actually got a unique ability as of the last update. So we'll go ahead and pick that up real quick. Where even is that thing? Actually, don't know where it is. So we're probably not going to be using Instill Light very much on this one. But where is this thing? I'm gonna feel real stupid if I loaded the wrong file here. It's gonna be an action ability, or a special ability, sorry. There we go, Arbiter. I missed the really obvious thing. So, instead of that, you know, we still wanted to have some support abilities. We see that it's going to take 120 MP to use. So essentially this build is going to be set up as a Arbiter spammer. So, you know, there we go. We know our goal is to spam Arbiter and to do as much casting damage as we can until then. So we've got our casting boosts off of this. We've got our pretty decent evasion boost out of this. I believe I actually have it running parry right now. Do I? No, I want to make use of that parry bonus, so we can actually get rid of Whim here. Go ahead and put up a parry. Where are you, parry? And there we go. 15% chance to parry all things, and this is before it's even been trained once. So she's got counter hit 2. I believe, yeah, she's capped out at counter 2. Draconic, because she gets access to a lot of caster abilities that will help her out a good bit. Combining stuff like, for example, Divine and Draconic tends to be pretty good, because it gives you options for getting around different defense types. Just point being, we had our goal, and we just kind of built towards that. Let's say what's a fun one here? Like, let's say, alright, let's go with this lizard over here, right? So you want to have a guy, where did I put my lizard? There he is. So you want to have a guy, you want a Dragoon that's going to be scaling good damage overall, but you still want him, you know, you still want him to be doing that, want him to have some pretty good movement, want him to be all over the place. So here's a fun build that'll take advantage of a set effect, because these actually come up pretty often. There's a lot of different set effects in the game, if you didn't know. So for example, one of them here, 3 of any of the dragon items will essentially give you Dragon Slayer from the Dragoon class. To give you an idea, typically you're going to be seeing this setup. So Wormscale Armor and Greaves, you're going to have those lying around. Dragon Scales drop pretty commonly in the endgame, or at least not uncommonly. And then weapon-wise, you can kind of combine them with anything. You don't necessarily need the shield, you only need 3 items there. So for example, the Balamung here, generally speaking, like any item that has either dragon in the name or has some massive dragon damage bonus will be part of the set. So the Dragon Slayer is part of the set, the Balamung is part of the set, I believe one of the Talons here is part of the set. I believe the Truenos are part of the set. What else here? I don't think it was the Glamrock, I think it was something else. But generally speaking, yeah, anything that's going to be a anti-dragon weapon will usually be part of that set. Now, what we're looking at here is a situation where they've got Dragon Slayer, so they will ignore defense. They've got a Glacial Choker for. Bear in mind, the chokers have a unique effect that's right over here someplace that they'll actually boost elemental damage by about 30%, give or take. I forget where exactly it's listed, but yeah, it's kind of a hidden bonus. Plus, they're getting Augment Ice, so Aug Ice will be about 5% per rank, give or take. So they're just right off the bat, they're already looking at 35%. You know, that could be scaled all the way up to like 70 if you end up getting everything all the way up there. Not to mention the 40% bonus they're getting to dragons off of this. Plus, they're ignoring their defense. This will easily, despite being a one-handed spear, this will easily one-shot any dragon in the game. But again, that was their goal. That is the purpose of this build. They can do other stuff, but their purpose is to go and take out dragons. And really, that is the mentality. Like, you have a unit, what do you want them to do? You look, and here's how I usually do it. Usually just like going through, it's like, what kind of interesting effects are on all these weapons? Bear in mind, this is a more or less completely unlocked save file, so you're going to have access to all the items and whatever else, but you just kind of look through, like, okay, what options do I have available at this point? What have I found at this point? You know, what kind of skills does the character have off the bat? So if we're going to go take a look right here. Like, we see that this one, looking at her skills, she's pretty balanced across the board for most of that top part there. So pretty much any role will do just fine for her. You know, don't really need to worry too much about where she gets placed, but let's look for something a bit more extreme. Like right here, we have one that's got really high dexterity, agility, and avoidance. Terrible at casting, got a decent amount of strength, decent amount of vitality. So I know that with her kind of moderate vitality, she doesn't want to be taking too many hits, but she can be putting out damage pretty well. So, you know, go for a long-range archer kind of situation with her. Seems like a pretty, give or take, optimal choice there. If you see somebody who rolled, rolled higher offensive stats in most cases, bear in mind the kind of categories where they roll their stats are going to be like, yep, you got your strength, dex, and vitality. That's going to be your warrior kind of setup. You've got your agility, avoidance, and dexterity character. That's going to be your speedy guy, and then your int, mind, res kind of characters that are meant to be your casters. And then lastly, you've got the ones that are just going to be full random. But bear in mind, it's not necessarily that is the one and done kind of thing that they can do. Like, in this would be one of those exceptions where they rolled a whole bunch of, you know, really offensive skills almost exclusively. Although, that's Sarah, now that I think about it. Of course she rolled those. Let's look for a rando here, like Mr. Yozis here. Looks like he went for that fighter kind of build, but originally he rolled some pretty low dex. So really high strength, really high vitality. I want to have him in the front. He's got okay agility and avoidance, kind of moderate across the board. So, pretty comfortable about having him in the front. I know he's got slightly higher vitality, so I'm okay just doing arms and leggings on him. He's just going to go full offense. I'm probably going to go down before the fight is done, but I'm assuming he'll probably do enough damage before, you know, all said and done to actually, to actually hopefully make an impact and get the fight ended before he bleeds out. Whereas, for example, this guy, he's rolled crazy high vitality. He's up here at 39. Although this is Voltaire, so yes, of course he rolled that. Let's move to a random one here. This is one of those ones that's just generic across the board. This is kind of how the vanilla game did it. So he is going to be... Mr. Hadrian here is just like the most mundane guy you've ever met. He's just got 31 to 33 in everything. So, generally speaking, nothing too special about this guy. This one, you know, he's going to be a strong guy. Mr. Black Iron Tarkus here. He was actually specifically picked for this. By the way, fun note, there actually is a one-handed two-hander in the game with a really hefty agility penalty. But just so you know, you can dual-wield two-handed swords if you want. What is a good example here? I think for this particular run, I just ran so many high-strength characters, it's not even funny. But, like, okay, this one is a fun example of one of the builds that I like to do. Because I want to have somebody that's essentially a heavy skirmisher for all intents and purposes. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term, when it comes to skirmishers, their whole point is to harass. They're not there to actually win any fights directly. They're not meant to, you know, go and overpower anyone. They're only there to weaken the other team so that somebody else can find an opening. So in this case, the way that they're set up is that, I mean, bear in mind they were this before they even became an Angel Knight. This is just kind of for fun. But essentially, they're there with a sidearm that'll hobble characters, so they may take the turn to go get rid of the hobble, or they'll just be slower moving around. They're set up, I think I originally had them set up to... Yeah, I don't have it on this one, but you can potentially have a character that will throw down phalanxes and things like that. Amazons and warriors can actually do that whole thing where they'll just sit there with their initial rank of Rampart Aura and just slow everybody down. Hoplites are particularly good with sidearms and that kind of thing. Plus, you know, they're just very good at blocking characters in general. But what I can do is I can put them right there in the front. I know with this heavy armor setup, they'll be pretty good at taking any hits that come their way. I mean, with their defensive situation here, it's going to take a lot to get past that defense. They've got a Ring of Alacrity to make sure that they actually hit with some of these relatively inaccurate sidearms, and they're only there to delay. Right, so not everything has to be about damage. In fact, there's oftentimes a bit of an over-focus on damage, which tends to lead to some weaker teams. So, sometimes, yeah, you want to focus on just weird crap that somebody can do. Like, for example, we've got a Swordmaster here, we could go for a two-hander, or we could go for a very high evasion build. I mean, his evasion is 293 compared to the relatively standard Berserker over here with his avoidance of 187. So this guy will have pretty much maxed out evasion against everything, without any question, while still doing okay damage, while still also having the option to shackle somebody with a parrying dagger here. Comes with a pretty solid bonus to parry in general. I mean, this guy's good. And on top of that, fun little side note here, if you look over at Enkindle, this actually gives you Renew. So Lava Walk and Renewal. So you might be wondering why Lava Boots? Because he's a Swordmaster that can regenerate. That's why. I actually allowed the Spark Guard boots for this particular one just because they're something that you actually do get relatively early in the game now. In most cases, anyway. Or you might wind up with the Grease Boots, so that's Water Walk and Resilience. Potentially very handy for ninjas here. So like, for example, this guy's just running a double dagger build. Ninjas are one of those ones that have switched from their vanilla role of, you know, just running around or one-shotting everything to a kind of mass shutdown class. So, like, for example, with this guy here, he's got double daggers, giving him 2 rolls at about 20% to inflict a bind on somebody. At the same time, Tornico is basically a sleep bomb, with a 3-range sleep bomb, so it's got pretty okay range on it. More than likely, you will have these points built up by the time that they finish their attack. You throw out the sleep bomb, they're probably bound, somebody else can be put to sleep. Next turn, they can use Wild Hunt to just run the hell away if they need to, or they can use it to go get to the leader of the fight, or whatever else. Like, they're basically there to skirt around the edges of the map, do all kinds of crazy stuff. But yeah. My point is, and I realize I've gone into a few specifics here, but just experiment. That is how you do builds in this game. You just experiment with weird crap and see if, you know, like right here, I was curious what would happen if I made essentially a RoboCop build. You just go full, I guess this is more like medium armor and a shield, but still. You just go like all tanky with a pistol. You can do that. You want to do axe and bow? Surprisingly viable. You want to do, you know, full Dragon Set 2-hander on a crit build, because you can't actually crit, you can't crit with Dragon Slayer. Well, both the Dragon Slayer and the Dragon Slayer, so that is essentially an 80% bonus damage on top of whatever Dragonology bonus damage they're getting on top of a crit. Nothing is surviving that. But okay, couple more things I want to cover. So yeah, just look at those stats, just see what they do, obviously. But when it comes to builds, another thing that oftentimes gets misunderstood, and this kind of goes back to the same thing about different roles here, is how exactly people are handling fights. Because the point of a build isn't to just like go and directly win the fight a lot of the time. I mean, you're still gonna have to, the way that you're handling things is gonna be very different. Like, this is a scenario I see come up relatively often. Like, okay, I can't deal with this healer, you know? This healer is just gonna keep healing, and I keep trying to fight everything head on, and it's not working. So, like, let's say, standard thing, you know, they attack, you know, this one attacks back, this one goes in, tries to surround him, this guy's over here doing his casting. So this guy's down to like a third of his health. He's taking a decent bit of punishment. This one's over here, meanwhile, attacking this one. So suddenly, this guy's at like 2/3 of his health, this one's at 1/3. This one's sitting over here, like, oh, let me just heal him up to full. So suddenly, they've gone from winning the exchange to essentially losing. They've lost a third of the health on this guy. They probably take some counters from this one, and suddenly this guy's back at full health. They've gained nothing, right? So this continues. This guy gets taken out by the archer. They're still trying to just get past that healer, and that's it. You know, then essentially she gets taken out. You know, she gets taken out from counters. He's over here. You know, these two fight it out. He like overpowers this one. Suddenly they've just completely won the fight with no issues. Now if we change that up very slightly, and I'm using Griffins because they've, generally speaking, been one of those like speedy classes or whatever else. It could be anything. But okay, so this guy attacks, right? Suddenly, okay, so they're already at the disadvantage in this particular engagement here. However, this one ends up going over here. He's going to start harassing the healer. This one's going to sit here holding this one, and then this one takes the fact that they're good against archers, because archers typically have lower resistance and few ways to actually boost them. will end up going this way, right? So, like, let's just use that as an example. So suddenly, this one's losing health, this one's losing health, and this one's losing health. Overall, they're doing less damage to a single unit, however, healing can only go in one place. So their options would either be he pulls back, they do an area heal, that'll essentially mean that these guys can go in, they can push their advantage, you know, like this one takes out the archer, suddenly these two can gang up on this one. This one's over here trying to area heal these two, as the AI loves to do. Eventually, you know, they can, the three of them together can overpower this guy, they can go here, go take out this guy, right? So suddenly, you know, it's gone completely the other way. However, there's a lot of other ways this can be approached as well. So, let's look at a few other scenarios here. So more than likely, this one's going to go forward, attack the caster here. Caster can go back, attack them. However, so like let's say in this case these are some heavy fighter type variants and all that kind of thing. Realistically, the Griffin would have gone first. So let's say the Griffin goes for the archer. And then this one's going this one. So ultimately, we have a scenario where this one's overpowering this one. These two are overpowering this one, so Archer's gone, but suddenly their main damage is still here. Their trickle damage is gone, main damage is still here, their healing is still here. Healing will continue healing, this one goes over this way, you know, eventually they manage to overpower that one. So suddenly it's 2v1, it's a bit more even. More than likely, with, you know, a caster and a fighter, they will eventually be able to get past this guy, and okay, they still win, just a bit less optimally. So okay, that's all well and good. However, one thing that often gets overlooked, and I feel like has to be mentioned a whole bunch, debuffs. This guy goes forward, puts a, like, let's say, puts a stun on him. Stuns are relatively common to hit. Puts a stun on him, so suddenly, 50% chance that healing will just straight up fail. Or like, let's say you have an archer back here, and they throw out a brimstone hail or something like that. So either way, they've landed the stun in one way or another. These guys go through, you know, they're going and doing their normal attacking. This one's exposed, he gets taken out, let's say. Like, they decide to go for the squishy one instead. These attack here, this one attacks this one here. His turn fails. Suddenly, you know, this one's able to overpower, or these two are able to overpower the archer. You know, he's over here trying to attack, trying to do whatever. Still, same thing. This one's, you know, suddenly he manages to get a heal off, but still, they're in a position that they can 2v1 this guy. Point being, if you get something like a shackle or a silence or something like that, it's gonna be better. But even a basic stun will usually do the job really well. So never underestimate, like, even losing a single heal tends to throw them completely off kilter. Yes, they might heal it, but that also means that they've just wasted a turn, and you can get into a better position after they've already wasted their turn. So there's a lot of different ways you can think about this. Just generally speaking, that's kind of what it comes down to. You want to first identify what your problems are, make builds to identify them. So like, let's say right here, we replace this guy with an archer. Something that sometimes gets overlooked is we go over here. Now we look at the stuff they can learn. And we go down the Art of War tree, and oh, what's this? Okay, they can use Water Walk, that's not super useful for them, but we got Bridle. That sounds like a pretty hard counter to a healer. We've got Benumb, we've got Envenom. So yeah, very early on, so 7, 11, 15. They can, essentially, they can completely mitigate this guy. So he would have to take his turn to get rid of that silence. So, you know, she goes forward, probably wouldn't move realistically, but I'm just moving them for reference. So they take a shot at this one. They go ahead and they shut off their healing. You know, suddenly same engagement, they try to attack. Archer tries to attack Archer, not going to do too much damage. They attack the Archer, Archer's a little bit injured. These two move in to cover them. This one, you know, will essentially continue pressuring this guy. Presumably he's sitting here just drinking down his draughts over and over, trying to get his voice back. Suddenly this one's at low health, this one's, you know, just kind of sitting there. But these two can overpower this guy. You know, this one will keep firing, this one will run away and heal a little bit. These two go over here, take out this one. Like, it all just comes down to knowing, you know, what kind of options you have to counter everything. So just go through. Don't go out of your way to figure out all the nitty-gritty of absolutely every single little thing. But just bear in mind, there's a lot of debuffs. There's a lot of debuffs that have a lot of different effects. Something like Leaden, for example, if you're having an issue with a squishy unit that keeps dodging everything, Leaden them. They're gonna have a drop in their accuracy of about in their evasion by about 40%. You have an issue with somebody running away constantly, get Hobble. It's also another one that's available relatively easily. I mean, there's a lot of debuffs that just never got used in vanilla because there was never a reason to do so, simply because you could overpower stuff, but in OV you can't necessarily overpower as easily, so you can have some real fun with the debuffs there. I mean, even something available relatively early on, Charm, is always going to make a huge difference. It's actually one of the reasons that it's not available as a finisher on bows anymore, because you could get absolutely busted with that. Oh, hi, kiddo. Oh, okay, apparently I need my hairbrush. My daughter says my hair is messy, I guess. Well, thank you. But at any rate, hopefully this at least gives some assistance as far as how all of that stuff works, as far as what you're going for. I know I didn't get into a lot of the specific nitty-gritty of particular bits of gear and whatever else. This is simply because it's something you kind of want to go through and take a look at yourself. You have a rough idea of what the categories are here. Obviously, the end game stuff is going to be unique anyway, so you're just going to be discovering that as you discover it. And yeah, if you have any additional questions or ideas for an improved version of this build guide, I'd absolutely love to improve on it in the future. I know it was a little bit vague, but yeah, let me know if this helps, and you have yourselves a good one. Take care.